Okay, and then they would, when we finished the waste, you know, we put that back in the, you know, the mop bucket, all right? And so we developed a relationship with the warden, and he stood there when they were sending us to Parchment, because what they would do is take the first group that came in, and they moved them on up to the county jail, and then when the other groups came in, they moved us all the way to, you know, Parchment. So when we had to leave the county jail to go to Parchment, the warden was very disappointed that this was a process. And he stood there by the door looking real sad, because this has been a really entertaining period, you know, in his work life, you know. And he said, y'all come back to see me here. And we said to us, okay, yeah, you wait. So we come back. So music was very important, because music was, you know, a way to really, you know, speak to the soul of people. And they don't have to be in tune, just sing, you see? But the music was very important. I'll stop there.
Take some questions.
Questions?
I would actually ask Mrs. LaFayette. I love your personality. I can tell you're able to roll with the punches because you've rolled with the punches for a long time. Can we hear just a little bit of your experience and some of the insights you gleaned and of shacking up with this wild guy?
Your experiences in being with Dr. LaFayette and all of the things that he had to experience. How did you process that?
Good question. 54 years we've been married, and so in many of these trips he went on, I didn't go. And like when he was being kidnapped, I was in Tuskegee, saw it on television, and almost killed me, but we found out he was all right. Some friends called and said he'd been saved, and I was so thankful. But actually, we worked so closely together on so many different issues that I've learned from him, and he often says, Kate, I've learned from you too. When he was made in charge of the Poor People's Campaign, which Dr. King had made sure that he did that before he passed, I was so involved with Head Start and various kinds of programs that were going on for little children throughout the United States that I had an opportunity to go to Washington, and I saw what was happening with some of the children who were not being cared for, who had been brought from different countries, and not countries so much, but different states, and they'd written in and they were just running all around. So fortunately I met other people who wanted to help set up this kind of daycare center for the children to be in, so the parents could go and testify to the people who they wanted to get their problems over to. I was just seriously doing that, and this young man came walking through and found me there, and I guess it was a shock. Is that right, Bernard? That I was helping to set up the program for these little children, and we did do it.
Yes,
Want to add one thing to it, and I'll pick it up.
Yeah, well, it was, they named it the Corona Scott Daycare Center.
Several people I worked with, and we
Yeah.
were just very interested.
So some people
in
just
that.
volunteered and did things that they saw needed to be done.
Yeah.
And she was one of them. I didn't even notice. A lot of mud and stuff like that all over the place. And I walked through that mud, and I looked up.
There I was, helping with the children.
There was a center. Just saw something and responded to it.
This was coming back from Columbia, or?
No, this was during the Poor People's Campaign.
At the Poor
Oh,
People's
oh,
Campaign, I was working
Yeah, this was
with young children directly then. I was not just.
That's when
working
y'all
with
first
Bernard.
met, you say?
I had met her before because a friend of hers, I went to get a bicycle.
Ended up with me with the
Supposed to
bicycle.
sell me a bicycle. And I went to a friend's house, and she's from there talking to me and interviewing me, and I didn't ride the bicycle. And next thing I know, I got invited to dinner, and this friend of hers, Kathy,
Arranged the dinner
oh
party.
yeah, so it was a blind date. And
So
that's
many
how I
years
first
ago.
met her.
And then something. Can you believe that?
Let's get a few more questions before.
Okay, any other particular questions? I've kind of looked at shared with you that we met many years ago, and I've been very concerned about his safety, to say the least. And I've also been happy that he's near in Tuskegee with us, and he's got a really good friend here who could probably add some points to what's going on as we watch Bernard take care of himself, because he has been very concerned about people all around. He sometimes doesn't say what the issue is that he's on top of at the time, but if I can help him in any way, get books out or get things going or talk to other people who can give him some direction, because I want him to be safe. And he's not a person who tells you a lot about what he's done unless he's in a setting like this, and he goes back and kind of brings it all together. And I'm just thrilled that I met him when I did. He was extremely positive about people he worked with, and took time to teach them various things, and then stepped back so that he could see them develop. And that's been a real key in my mind to watch my husband, because he's not looking for a lot of praise and a lot of people pushing him up. And I think we both know that, right? But the thing is, I am happy to sit with him when he's telling these stories, because I've been a part of them. I've learned myself how to deal with families, how to deal with, we had a young boy we lost about 4 years ago, but when I married Bernard, I was asked to help raise these children, and that was a beautiful experience for me, because that's what I had learned all my life, to work with young children. I'm the youngest of a pretty old family that's gone on, but I have enjoyed his development as a human being, helping other people develop. He's so serious about it. I've seen my husband, in many cases, receive a phone call that he doesn't say much of anything to anybody on that phone call. He listens. At the end, pulls it together and gives some direction. But he's not a real hard talker. Like when you have him here today, I can say this is a real special time to just let him give some things in sequence. So I'm thrilled to be a part of his life, to learn how far we've come together, the people he's helped, the travels he's made. And I might add, too, that I've been with him on many of those travels. I went into many of the foreign countries, and I learned how to treat people very special. And I was trained also to do this training. And I've been just very pleased that I've been able to develop and become the kind of person that I am working with him.
That's perfect, thank you.
I have to
I
tell
like
you,
you developed it too also.
I have to tell you this, we were in Nigeria, and we were training people, and those who were fighting the government and over the shale oil spill. Now, unfortunately, they were fighting their government, but it was somebody in their government who took the money. The Shell gave the money, and then to the government, but then it was somebody in the government who took the money and took off. Okay, so they couldn't deal with the cleanup of the Shell, because the oil meant that some of their, water, so they couldn't fish, because it was all filled. And then on the land, it was all messed up. So anyway, that's why they were fighting the government. And we went in, and pull all the leaders together, and we agreed that they would go through the training. And as a result of going through the training, they would get a certain amount, you know, of money for themselves. And then those who went to the high-level training would be able to go to South Africa and get training and that kind of thing as well, certification. They were, so our method for training was that we had them hear the lectures, and then we would get them into small groups so they can share with each other what they had heard. So that way you make sure that it's not just your ears hearing this, or something you might have missed even, okay? And guess what happened? They depended on others to tell them what happened. And so we put them in small groups. And we also found out that there were those who could not read and write. Okay? And they used to get the manuals, the training manuals, and put them on their head, walk around with their head on the manual. And some people said they slept with the manual on their head. Now, she's the one that worked with those folk because, you know, she worked with children and some of them couldn't read and write or whatever. So her skills were very important. And guess what? They end up teaching the others, even though they couldn't read and write.
That's right, they would take the information.
And see, I'm walking around observing everything, so if there's anything wrong, I'd be free to correct it or intervene or whatever, okay? Guess what I discovered? And I'm Harvard graduate and all that kind of stuff. The ones who couldn't read and write, the way they were able to preserve the material is because they had put what they heard in the form of music.
It was quite an experience.
And they're the one that taught the others. You know, I never even imagined something like that. And to the person, they could, like, I remember we used to sing our ABCs, you know, and stuff like that. But music, they retain. If you can put what you're hearing in the form of music, and see, they had a lot of experience doing that because they couldn't read and write. So it was in every situation, they, you know.
And they believed in each other. They really got to know each other and they helped each other learn together. It was amazing.
I want to make sure that we get as many questions in as possible.
Thank you.
And let's shorten the answers so we can kind of do this quickly. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lafayette, Mrs. Lafayette. This has been so wonderful hearing about the trailblazing and the many accomplishments from the civil rights movement, and we know that there's still much work to be done. What, sir, moving forward, do you think one or two things that really needs to be done to keep the momentum going so that the accomplishments can continue?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go from here?
Well, there are a lot of things that can be done, but I'll just pick out a few, okay?
Yes, sir.
One is that we need to make sure that we have effective communication with the young people. Some of them go and visit their grandparents. They don't talk to them. They go and do their little gadgets. That's not visiting with your grandparents. You know, no communication, no talking. All right? So we got to make sure we talk with our young people. Go back and forth, etc. Okay? The next thing is that coalition building. In the movement, Martin Luther King and the rest of us always pulled groups together. All right? Groups that had shared the same goals and maybe not everything, but just one goal that they share together, you build a coalition. Like right here in Montgomery, MIA, Montgomery Improvement Association. That consisted of several organizations, including labor union, ministers, and women's organizations, and college students, and all that. Okay? Same thing in Chicago, CCCO, Coordinating Council of Community Organizations. All right? SNCC, they're made of college, campus groups coming together, okay? All right? So coalitions help to build movements. Now, this can be debatable, but I always share it because I believe it. The recognition of women leadership, okay? The leadership that women bring to the table. I mean, you see them in the background sometime in photographs of the history of the movement. We know Rosa Parks, okay? But we don't realize how much their contribution be, okay? And I think it's important to know that women have more nodules on their brain. Smart men know how to select, okay, women leadership. Okay? Yeah. So the important thing, like my church, for example, my grandmother organized that church, I think I tell you. No, and that's because they do that. All right? And so blending together that kind of leadership is extremely important. All right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
So, you were saying you were there with Dr. King on that day, April 4th. As a teacher and historian, I try to not look just at the events of the day. I try to figure out the emotion behind the day. And when I went through all the records, the thing that stood out to me the most looking at the morning of April 4th was that it was 43 degrees that morning. And it made me wonder, standing outside the Lorraine Hotel, what that conversation was like with the cool air, the hard day that was April 3rd. What was everyone in the room feeling that morning, and how to approach that day, change some of the conditions they'd experienced the day before, move on and get the strike moving forward again?
Good question.
Martin King was determined that he was not going to let that be the final experience, what happened earlier. And so he agreed that night to go to and speak at the mass meeting. So he hadn't planned to go to the mass meeting. He was in his pajamas, in bed. Okay?
We've heard that.
And we have, was working on the press release that night. And Abernathy called and said that, no, they want you to come. This is your crowd. And Jesse Jackson was there, and Andrew Young was there, and Jose, all those people ready to speak at the mass meeting. So Martin Luther King said, are you telling me that you want me to get up out of my bed, take off my pajamas and get dressed in my suit, and come out in this raining, because it was pouring down. He said, they call it raining cats and dogs. Okay, you can interpret that. So, and Abernathy said, yes. He said, this is your crowd. Preacher's language, right? No, they're not going to be satisfied until you come. So that's how we had to stop our press release. So that's when he got up, the car came, and he went on and spoke. He was glad he did, because, he was just euphoric, because he was down because of the march had been broken up in violence. In the newspaper, you can read it, it said this is the end of the nonviolence stuff. Yeah. When your nonviolent march turns violence, then, you don't have any more control. So, I was in the room with him that night, and my room was 206, his was 306. So I went in and continued to work on the press statement. So when he came back that night, he wasn't ready for no press statement. I'll tell you about this because I'm getting old. He had a pillow fight. With Andy. He was so euphoric. Okay. Martin Luther King was an ordinary guy, you know. He was a pool shark, you know that, right? Yeah, he shot pool. Yeah, in the seminary there was a pool. They had a pool table down in the church, you know what I mean? So that's where but he was really good at it, man. Clean the table. Okay. But anyway, he wasn't ready to do the press statement until the next morning. And so that's the thing that really made the difference. When I left, but you see, Martin Luther King, when Kennedy got killed, John, he was looking at the television at his dining room table, and that's what he told his family. He said, that's what's going to happen to me. He only worked in the movement 12 years. When you think about it, I mean, that's kind of a short period for, you know, you think about others who've lived a long time, stuff like that. So, now, personally, I was in flight when he got killed from Memphis to Washington, D.C. And I arrived, and my ride was not there. Walter Fauntleroy, who was elected official, was supposed to pick me up. No. So I said, what's going on here? So I called the office back in Memphis, and they said that, and I called the local office, and they said Martin Luther King had been shot. At that point, you know, he hadn't died, he was shot. Well, I wanted to find out how, you know, famous it was, so I grabbed a telephone. In fact, I grabbed 2 telephones. In the airport in those days, you could have, you know, in Washington, they had telephone booths, but they also had circles, you know, where you could grab. So I was at AP and UPI, and they were reading the ticker tape. In those days, they had something like, they call it ticker tape. Okay, so I'm listening to the news guys reading the ticker tape to me. And the fellow from UPI stopped reading. And that's when I knew something had happened. But I didn't expect Martin Luther King to die, because, you know, he'd gotten stabbed in Central Park. Okay, if you remember earlier, I mean, I saw the mark on his chest where he'd been stabbed. And I didn't expect him to die. But, and the guy didn't tell me he died. It was just his silent, okay, sniffling. This white reporter was sniffling. And that's how I knew Martin Luther King died. Okay? But I think that he had a commitment to continue until he died. He didn't hold up at all. So, frankly, it was no surprise to him either.
So in essence, he was on the way. So he was not on the balcony during the time that of his assassination. But the jubilation of resuscitation of the movement after the speech that night kind of spurred on hope for the future. Somebody else? This week, go ahead.
I just was wondering if you could speak a little more about your experience in Cuba and working with Cuban inmates. I'm also Cuban, and I was just very curious about your time there. I never thought that the Cuban government would be at all interested in the nonviolent movement, so.
Oh, there's some things sometimes we forget. Remember when Fidel Castro ran for office the first time, he was met with such force until he backed down. I think Batista will end up, okay? Right. Now, the next time Fidel, was gonna go and run for office and use military force, he went into the mountains. And guess who he got out of the mountains? Those are the black folks. In Cuba. Okay? In fact, the student government officer, head of the student government when I was there, was a black fellow, a young black student. Okay? So the point is, while it's not so widespread, that kind of thing, up in the mountains, that's where the Africans, stayed. They were driven up in the mountains, that kind of thing. But they came and they were very much a part of Castro's government, that kind of thing, etc. So when I was there training them, I learned a lot about, what was going on there with Castro. Okay. He was a long speaker.
Yes.
Every 2 hours at a time.
All right, let's
There
get
was
some,
one
we're gonna
more?
get as many
Okay.
more. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So I was curious with everything going on now, how, in your opinion, to stay positive. My classmates know I'm a cynic. I don't exactly look at the positive side of things. So I guess my question is, how do you stay positive in all this, having gone through what you've been through, and then now seeing how, yes, things have gotten better, but how much more is left? And I'm very quick to anger, unfortunately. So definitely wouldn't have been part of the sit-ins, nonviolent type. So just how to be positive and how to.
That's very.
That, I mean,
Yeah.
watching the documentary, they're like, yeah, well, there's the ones that are nonviolent, there's the ones who stayed at home, and I've been staying at home. So just curious on your opinion on that and how to stay positive. And, yeah.
Yes. A kind of controversy in your own mind, but also your conscience. And so what you have to decide for yourself is what's important to you in terms of a contribution that you could make that might help make a difference. And I know you're only one life. You're not two lives. I mean, even though you have twins and all that, it's still one person. Okay? What could you do? What could be your value in life? Some people feel that the more money they got, okay, the more they're worth, and they're worthwhile, okay? But ultimately, what money you talking about here? You ain't seen no brake truck in no funeral, okay? And we all gonna face it one day. So now here we are, now, every day. Okay, what do we do to sustain ourselves? I found that anger is violence toward yourself. Because that's the only person you hurt when you're angry. Okay, now when I was a little boy, I was scared of ghosts. And I had a little brother who died at 4 months old, and I was 4. And, and I had a room by myself. And I used to think that those ghosts were under my bed at night. And I didn't feel good about myself, okay? Because I was scared of ghosts. And being scared is a form of violence toward yourself. So I decided as a little boy, I'm gonna fight fear of ghosts. So what I did, I figured the best way to do that was to walk through the graveyard at night. So I walked through the graveyard at night. and then until that cat jumped out the tree. I wiped myself off, turned around and went again.
Haven't been afraid since.
Well, not a ghost.
Yes, right.
Catch it.
So I went back to the graveyard again, and it was a grave that was already dug, and something said, "Ooh," and I took off again. I said, "Wait a minute, hold on, put on brakes." I went back. I went back, and there was a drunk man that had fallen in the grave.
Have heard this?
And people told me, said, "Hey, you're so silly. Ain't no such thing as no ghosts." I said, "Look, I go to church 3 times a week, and I always hear about the Holy Ghost." So what you gonna tell me, you know? So if they're Holy Ghosts, they got to be unholy.
That's a good one.
So
Aced on that one.
I continued to walk to the graveyard, a little boy now, at night, until I overcame the fear of ghosts. And so it didn't matter to me anymore whether they existed or not. I wasn't gonna let ghosts control my life. So I overcame that, okay? And so what I had to deal with is the fact that, as they say, well, you know, if you die, then you're gonna become a ghost. Okay, so they want to be doing all that kind of stuff, etc. So I'll tell you this, and then that will summarize this. When I was in Selma, in fact, most of you may already know that they planned. I came home one night and I drove my car in front of my house. Okay, and I got in the driveway. It was after a mass meeting, and I was getting some leaflets out of the back of my car, and there was a car across the street, and the hood was up, and there were 2 white men, one under the hood and the other under the steering wheel. And well, I was used to seeing, you know, because the white neighborhood was down the street, so I saw white people driving cars by me all the time. So I ain't paying attention. So when I was getting stuff out the backseat of my car, I had a 48 Chevrolet that Julian Bond got for me. So giving everybody else new cars and giving me a 48 Chevrolet. Okay, fluid drive, whatever. You know. But I heard some footsteps coming behind me as I was bent over. I had a two-door car. And so I turned around, and sure enough, that was this white fella, huge guy with crew cut, haircut, and sleeves rolled up on his top of his, shoulders and everything. And I turned around and I looked, and I was, really skinny in those days. And I looked up at him, and he said, "Buddy, how much would you charge me to give me a push?" Well, that's how they wanted to push. So, I won't charge you anything, I didn't close the door and got behind and lined up behind him.
Hello.
He talked to the guy in the steering wheel, that kind of stuff. I saw that, they had a 57, Chevrolet. So, he was bent down looking at the bumpers. So I rolled down the window. I said, "Do they match?" I knew a 48 Chevrolet, your bumpers are high like that. And he said, "Well, you better come take a look." So I said, "Okay." It was late at night, I was tired, go to bed. So I went and got out of my car and bent over, and boom, he hit me. I went flat down in the middle of the street. Whoa. I got back up again. It's like I did when the cold water came on me. All right, and slowly raised my head up. I didn't act frantic. I got my hands down, so, you know, to my side. And I looked up at him, and he held off, and he hit me again. Still got the scars, you know, right there. And I went down, sat down on my knees, and I took my time, 1 foot at a time, got up again, raised my head slowly at him, and he jumped up in the air. He was already hit her, and came down and hit me in the middle of my head. Now, he's done no research because, you know, most folks got soft spots in the middle of their head. I don't have a soft spot, mine is hard. So he hit me in the top of the head, but I went down, again, straight down, because he hit me in the top of my head. And I got back up again and looked at him, and he had a gun. He had this gun pointed at me. That's what he was hitting me with, the butt of the gun. And so when I realized this guy was getting ready to shoot me, I yelled for my neighbor upstairs, you know, who'd been to Korea and Vietnam. And I said, Red, Red. He was a light-skinned, you know, light folk. It was Red. And Red came across the banister with a rifle. He used to train people to shoot. So I knew he could take him out. And I said, no, Red, don't shoot. I put up my head, my hands, and he was trying to get around me. He put a beam on this guy, and I blocked him. I said, no, Red, don't shoot, don't shoot. So I wouldn't let Red shoot. I was blocking him from the guy who had the gun in my back. Because you always act under any circumstances in a way that is going to help you accomplish your goal. And shooting this man was not move me any closer to my goal, but rather far away. So this man, instead of shooting me, went and jumped in his car and took off. Now my purpose right there, I didn't know the whole circumstances, but I felt that I did not want to be the reason why this man got killed. Okay? And I was blocking him, which meant he could have killed me, the one in the back as well as the one in the front. If he shot, trying to shoot the other guy, he could shoot me. And if he shot that white man, it would have been over for him. The FBI came a week later, told me there was a 3-state conspiracy. They planned to kill 3 of us the same night. One was Benjamin Elton Cox. Benjamin Elton Cox was with CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, using the original Freedom Ride from Washington, D.C. He didn't come home that night, so they missed him. That was the same night that Medgar Evers in Jackson, Mississippi was killed. They planned to kill him. He came home, and there's a lot of story about him. And then they planned to kill me. So it wasn't just Selma, Alabama now. It was a 3-state conspiracy. The FBI told me that. Okay? And they had planned to do an Emmett Till on me. In other words, they were going to castrate me and throw me in the Alabama River. That was their plan. By saving this guy, okay? Now, the other reason was that he got me there was because they had a mob waiting for me after I gave him a push. You see, had I given him a push, there was a mob waiting down the road. And since I said I wasn't going to charge him anything for pushing him, that meant I wouldn't stop. And had I seen that mob, I could have just taken off and they would have missed it, okay? But when I said I was not going to charge anything, that's when he changed his plan and decided to go ahead and kidnap me, knock me out, and drag me in his car, and they were waiting for me. So I didn't know until the next morning that Maker was killed because they took me to the hospital and put some stitches, about 7 stitches in my head. Okay? But to be honest with you, I'm surprised I'm still here. But I'm here.
We're happy you're here.
Yeah, I know there's a time limit to everything, but we want to make sure that you all have exhausted all of your questions and even comments, because there is application to contemporary things as we look historically. And I think it's important not to just look in the historical context, but also to apply those principles to things that we are addressing today.
You have a question?
Yeah, it's to a question about something you just said. How do you maintain that clarity in that moment? I don't know that if I was stunned in that way that clarity would come to me, and I would like to think that it would, but how do you keep your goals so firmly in front of you that even in moments that catch you off guard, you are still so clearly focused? I don't know if I'm explaining my question well, but
Yes, I understand what you're saying. And the way you do that is the same way you study law. You keep imagining being in certain circumstances and how you're going to respond to it. Taking what you have already learned and being able to apply it to situations that will come up. So it's part of your imagination. So you constantly do it. You see, lawyers are really actors. So what you do is that they call you, okay, and all lawyers don't necessarily go to court. A lot of them spend a lot of time doing research, okay, and looking at situations and stuff like that, etc. And that's what I do. I learned that from lawyers. So my point is, you constantly practice. If it's not actually in reality, it's through your imagination. And you try to put yourself in situations and say, if I were in this situation, what would I do? Or what's different, okay? It was just like the water. It's no different from that water being thrown on you, okay? You, at the moment, can make the difference in terms of the outcome. And the outcome has all to do, not with your income, but it has to do with, okay, what goal are you trying to achieve? You. You can't determine other folks' goals, okay, but you can be an example for them in terms of other people and that kind of thing. So I am pleased that I am still able to breathe every day. I feel really blessed, to tell you the truth. I feel very fortunate, and I got some of the most loving people around me. That's 2 of them over here, you see. He's not just my driver now.
You're so sweet. Oh my God.
I can't, if I begin to tell you all the things that, Omar, have done, you wouldn't believe it, okay? Yeah. So,
Wonderful person.
these kind of situations help preoccupy me and help to strengthen me. That's why I come, okay? Otherwise, we'd be out playing golf. And that, we also play golf together.
Oh, I see.
And he's a good golfer. But you have to be prepared emotionally. So you never let down. You keep thinking about situations and imagining situations that you're in and be able to do that. Now, one thing that helped me was the course I took in Japanese management over at MIT. In other words, when I was at Harvard University, I took courses at MIT, okay, because they taught, because at Harvard, you could take a course in any university in the area. That was the advantage I had there, okay? And so MIT, it was, and it was in management. And see, what happened is that the reason you got all these Japanese cars around here, okay, it's no coincidence, all right? It has to do with their management, okay, in production. You know, like, for example, they are very particular about the doors on Japanese cars. Do you know that? Oh yeah, they're very particular. They use mechanical, electronic door hangers. People don't put the doors on the cars. It's all electronic, very precise. The other thing is, you know, they always have a supervisor that looks at the whole thing. Even the workers. You say, well, what do you work in building cars? What do you do? I say, well, I build cars. They don't look at themselves as doing motors, okay, or some part of the body of the car. No, they look at the whole thing. Yeah. Some industry came to one of the, here in the United States, I was doing a case study, and they wanted the Japanese to produce some kind of something for them, and they invited the management, top management over, and then they went around and got the other engineers, and they had to come over and hear what you had to do. And in the last round, they asked the maintenance people. When I talk about maintenance, I'm talking about real, you know, one who deals with the waste. He said, well, look, I already told y'all what we want to do, and he explained to me why y'all have to do that. No, because each person who work on building cars, not a particular part of the car. So in other words, they can see where an error has been made, okay, and correct the error and stuff like that. So it's holistic, and that's why they have those ramps. They still do. You know how they put the ramp around where people walk around? Mm-hmm. That's where the term supervisor comes from, because they're so close to the ceiling until the light, you know, they have to wear a visor, a great big visor like that. And that's why they call them supervisors.
All right. Mm-hmm. Any more? Quickly.
I do have one. Dr. LaFayette, so of course our students are going to be future lawyers. And so as they go about and wanting to involve themselves in different movements and change making, we've noticed throughout the civil rights movement this coalition, and what sometimes we call that rainbow coalition, where you have people from all types of backgrounds coming towards one cause. And so sometimes when we're thinking about going into a movement, and it might not be our space, but that kind of being an ally, can you talk a little bit about that? Because there can be some hesitation in thinking that, okay, I'm not welcome. Should I help? How can I help? Am I needed to help? And I wanted to see if you have any advice about that, especially with this. You all did such a good job doing that coalition building back during the movement.
Okay. Well, you have to first of all think, if you're a lawyer, about whether you're going to be a xenophyte or a cosmopolite.
Was that a new dance?
They want to know, what is that?
Oh, it's just kidding.
It's whether you're going to look at the star, the North Star, or the constellation. So you can see a star, but do you want to see the picture? And how it fits in with everything else? And that's what we're talking about here. You wanna look at it holistically and be able to see how each part reinforce each other. And then you can see the broader picture and contingencies of reinforcement. Yes, you see something exists, but what reinforces it? What is it that keep it going? What's it that makes it what it really is? Where does the power come from? Okay? So, therefore, you must think that way, and then you must look that way. When I went into Selma, Alabama, nobody wanted to go, and they said that you can't accomplish anything in Selma, Alabama. So the short of it is, when I went to Selma, Alabama, I did the research before I went. I did my research at Tuskegee University, because while I was doing the research in Atlanta, I found out that Tuskegee's library was the only library that I could go to in our area, you know, the South, that had a publication, a monthly publication of the White Citizens Council. It is so important for you to understand the difference between the White Citizens Council and the Ku Klux Klan. Not the same. Okay? No. So, you had to learn about mean white folks, because they said that's the reason why you couldn't accomplish anything in Selma, is because you had the white folks too mean and the black folks too scared. I knew I scared black folks, but mean white folks, I knew something about them, but I needed to know all I could. So when I got to Atlanta looking for directorship of voter registration, there was an X on the map. And they weren't going to Alabama, period. So they're not going to Alabama. You got a movement that was successful in Montgomery? You got a movement there in Birmingham? Which means you can't have a voter registration movement in Alabama? I said, well, that's what the folks said. 2 teams went down. I don't call their names because it isn't necessary to say that, you know, they refuse to go to Selma, you know. So I don't call their names. They know who they are, okay? So I wanted to find out, why was it, okay, a situation where white folks were so mean that black folks didn't even want to, and it was true. When I went and I studied Rufus Lewis. He was here, and funeral director and a former football coach at Alabama State, right here in Montgomery. I came and I stayed with him 2 days. And we went over a lot of things. I learned a lot from him. You know what he used to do? He used to go to folks' house at night, and they used to invite their relatives and their friends, and he would teach them how to fill out the voter registration form. And then they would then go to their homes, okay, and they would invite their friends and family members, and therefore each home became a place where you could learn how to register vote. That was his strategy. When I got to Selma, I did not ask any person to register to vote. To this day, I've never asked any black person to register to vote. No. I would say, what do you think is the biggest problem here in Selma? And he would say, the streets are not paved. All this mud all over the place and other kind of stuff. You can tell where the white folks live and the black folks. Because black folks ain't got all this mud. And, you know, white shoes get all messed up when it rains and all that kind of stuff. You know. Oh. Thank you. No more discussion. Go to somebody else. No electricity in '62. No electricity. They had potholes, and they had to put their iron in coal pots to heat the iron to iron their clothes. They had electricity. No TV. No radio. Yeah, they got batteries, but no TV. Okay. What do you think is the biggest problem? Every time they spend $11 on a white child's education, $1 on a black one. Oh, I see. around again. Inquisition was the key to tying things together. See, people, the determination and the will to go register to vote has to come from within. And the way you get it within, it has to be connected, okay, to something that they think is important to them, not you. So, I come back and say, well, why do you think the streets are not paved? He said, those folks downtown? What people? Those white folks downtown. Which white folks? Those elected officials, you know, city council. Oh, you said they were elected? Oh, that means they were voted in, right? So you got to tie the vote. You get my point, right? Okay, that's my point. Unless they can identify voting, get my point? Yeah, so that's where you got to go with it. It has to come from within, not paving the streets.
Yes.
Unless you're going to get out there and pave them. All right? Yeah. So that's the approach I used. I never asked. Now I set up a clinic where people could go, and I got the local people to set up at the Elks Club. By the way, here's something you should know. I can't say I understand it, but I can describe it to you. If you were stopped by a policeman in Selma, Alabama, and you put your foot a certain way next to you, one foot next to the other in a certain way, you don't have to worry about getting a ticket. So the Elks Club was a place where we had our office, okay, at the downstairs, and we had our voter registration clinic upstairs, because there was no way for them to bomb certain places, okay? Secret orders. And white folks respect that as well as to other people. You had no Masonic Temple bombed. And that's where we used to have our meetings. The SCLC office in Atlanta, Georgia, used to be upstairs, used to be downstairs of the Masonic Temple. Remember that? Okay? Yeah. So, my point is, even though you're white, there's something that goes beyond racism. You need to find out what that is. For example, a white man came to me one time in Selma, and he said, I understand that you help folks get registered to vote. I said, yeah, because that was true. He said, well, I got some folk, okay, and these were his tenant farmers, black folks. He wanted me to help them go through the process of teaching them how to fill out the voter registration forms and everything. You know why? Because he had a son graduating from college who was going to come back to Selma and run for office. And he knew he could get them to vote, right? Well, do you think I turned them down? No. Bring them on. They might vote for your son now, but hey, bring them on. Vote for the president.
Anybody else? Good? Is that good?
Thank you.
Is everybody good? You give yourselves a round of applause.
Oh,
We certainly appreciate this time together. And I guess to summarize, everybody is listening to one radio station. That's WIIFM. That's what's in it for me. And so whenever you are approaching something, always approach it from the vantage point of the person to whom you are appealing to.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.